I'd like to start my presentation. This is not a briefing, this is a lecture. The difference being, briefing is usually someone talking at you. The lecture is actually an academic presentation where you can ask questions and hopefully you're learning. I will cover finance, and what I've done both in the book and in this lecture is break it down to the point where it's understandable by people that don't have masters in business administration. I mean, that was the entire intent on developing this. Just a little bit about myself. I am a Christian, make no bones about it. I've spent years in the Middle East as part of the military. Been a husband for 26 years. My wife and I had a renewal ceremony at number 25. Father of 2 kids, soldier of 26 years, and a West Point graduate. For almost 10 years, I've been a professor and a researcher, and part of the reason I did that is when I got out of the military, I was healing from some injuries, and so I decided to go into a PhD program. Always wanted to get my doctorate because I never quite understood some of the things that was presented to me, both at my master's level and at the bachelor's level, and so it was really a pursuit of truth and a pursuit of education. You see the big mass right there? That's one of the groups I spoke to. So far I've spoken at the Tea Party National Convention, I spoke at the 9/12 Project, spoken in 35 states. Most recently I gave 8 lectures in the beautiful state of Hawaii, and then I moved here. Part of the way I wrote the book is I followed the Tea Party Express bus, essentially from coast to coast. As a college professor, the whole phenomena of the Tea Party interested me. And I went to some local events and that type of thing. It was basically an old group of guys that used to get together anyway, and then all of a sudden we started calling ourselves Tea Partiers. But I followed the bus out of curiosity, and as we went from the West Coast all the way to D.C., I interviewed people. Literally, I interviewed thousands of people. And by the time we got to Washington, D.C., I had enough information to write a book. As a result of that, what I found is people in major cities and people in rural areas basically have the same ideas. I mean, I put them in the front of the book. This was compiled based on that road trip. My wife was going, well, you're going where? You're following a bus? And this is actually what I compiled based on about an inch thick of paper notes from South Dakota, from Arizona, from California, and Tennessee, everywhere in between. Tea Partiers told me, we want, and I paraphrased it, we want our unabridged freedoms as promised in the Constitution. We want the President, the Congress, and the courts to comply with the U.S. Constitution as the highest law of the land. We want the courts to interpret, not make laws. We want an end to the robbery and redistribution of our personal property and wealth by socialistic progressives. We want the government to stop confiscating our wages for unconstitutional corporate welfare and foreign aid. We want large, wasteful federal government reduced to a level compliant with the United States Constitution and state rights. We want the military to protect our borders rather than foreign borders in undeclared wars. We want all elected officials to be subject to the same laws and same penalties as our citizens. We want a balanced budget and an end to deficit spending. We want audit and then elimination of the Federal Reserve. We want each bill to be read thoroughly before it is voted upon. And we want all bills to quote the section and clause of the U.S. Constitution that provide legitimacy. This is the list that we should give every one of our federal elected officials and say, do it or you're a one-term politician. Thank you. This is the purpose of the briefing, or the lecture. The State of the Union as presented by Barack Obama is not correct. So the intent of this lecture is to correct it and give factually based information in an unbiased way as possible. And I'll tell you, my only bias is my dedication to the 10 Commandments and my dedication to the United States Constitution. That's my only bias throughout the book, the briefing, and my own life. But you saw each of those component parts coming down on the screen. And the bottom line is that roof that stands above America is based upon the Judeo-Christian values, which I abbreviate CLAMS, and I'll explain that in the next slide. Constitutional compliance. The pillars envisioned by the Founding Fathers include small federal government, states' rights, low spending and taxes, the individual rights and responsibilities. And you've got those 4 pillars that were envisioned by the Founding Fathers that hold up the roof, which is called personal and economic freedom. It is, in fact, a beautiful idea that works as long as you have a foundation and each one of those component pillars. Now you pull one of those pillars away and it's like a hurricane blowing through your neighborhood. Okay? Now, we'll break those down into components. So we start with Judeo-Christian values. Why do you say Judeo? Well, Christianity began, with the Torah and the 10 Commandments and evolved into the birth of Christ. The birth of Christ brought salvation to a lot of people, and you know what? We ended up with a list of rules there as well. Some of the rules, the way I taught my children the 10 Commandments, this is the last 5 of the 10, is CLAMS, which you see on the left-hand side. Covet, lies, adultery, murder, and stealing. Those are the final 5 commandments of the 10. Do not covet someone else's property, paycheck, wealth, and prosperity. Don't lie to us, Mr. President. Don't commit adultery, Mr. Wiener. Don't commit murder, Mr. Kennedy. And stop stealing. The thing that right there is listed as intergenerational theft, because what we've got going on in Washington, D.C. is this generation of politicians is spending, and the spending will not be paid for until my children and my children's children are paying taxes. That, my friends, is intergenerational theft, and there's no basis for it in the U.S. Constitution. The other critical thing is that when you look at this level of moral bankruptcy in Washington, D.C., what it tells our young people is that the oath of office and rule of law, which this nation was founded upon, are now relative. It's relative to who you know. Why is it Congressman Rangel is not in jail? Why is it that we've got, I'll show you the next one. Why have we got fiscal bankruptcy? Well, you have fiscal bankruptcy because they've been lying to us and stealing the funds that have been going into Washington, D.C. for over 50 years. They are directly connected between the morals and the tangible assets that you can see and measure. The reality is today we have a choice. We either continue with a constitutional republic and capitalism, or we go with socialism and cults of personality. Cults of personality do not work. You take a look at a continent like Africa, which has more natural resources than we do. Why is it Africa is not a world superpower? It's because each of their governments have been based on cults of personality. The cults of personality, the person dies and then a new guy has a coup d'etat and takes over. We have been able to survive as long as we did because until recently we have been based upon rule of law. Now we're shifting, and it's a dangerous shift, and our young people are being brainwashed into thinking that it's the right thing to do. Now if you go beyond Judeo-Christian values, the next step up, now picture biblically, this is the rock upon which you build your house, and the constitutional compliance is the basement or the foundation of that house. If you don't comply with the Constitution, why'd you take an oath? I'm befuddled. And frankly, I thought we had a fairly secure government until just a couple of months ago. I had a conversation with a general officer that said, well, the Constitution's relative. I said, General, you took an oath to support and defend the United States Constitution, and you're telling me the Constitution's relative? What is it that you swore an oath to? Well, it's a living document and it shifts. I said, General, you are a traitor. And there was a hush in the room. I was speaking to a general in a room full of generals. There was a hush in the room. You, sir, are a traitor because you took an oath to something that you think fluctuates. Let me tell you, if you get a mortgage on your house and you go back to the bank and say, well, that paperwork I signed is relative. It's fluctuating. It's a living document. You'll be laughed out of the bank. The same should hold true as an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And frankly, folks, I took that oath over 30 years ago, and I believe in it, I comply with it, and I expect my elected officials to comply with it. It makes me mad that they don't. Now you take a look at it, Thomas Jefferson said, the U.S. Constitution is a restrictive, not a permissive document. He thought that far back. Now, individual rights should be, they aren't always, tied to responsibility. It's a dual system. It's yin and yang. It's the same parts of the penny, the front headpiece and the tailpiece. The reason is that you cannot insist on individual rights and yet be irresponsible. You can't do it. Yet, you take a look in D.C., we've got a president that committed perjury. It was not about oral sex. It was lying under oath. Perjury is a felony level offense with up to 10 years imprisonment. Instead, he got a book deal. And Monica got a 6-figure job. We got Congressman cheating on his taxes. Congressman Rangel should be in jail for the amount of taxes he cheated on and kickbacks based on an alleged charitable organization. Secretary of the Treasury. The guy who is Secretary of Treasury is also in charge of the IRS. And you know, it was in the newspapers that he cheated on his taxes. He saw TurboTax messed up once. I did research and found out he consecutively cheated 5 years in a row. Felony level cheating. Yet he's in charge of the IRS. Wrong answer. The people that confirmed him own some of that guilt, and that's wrong. So Congressman Rangel was in charge of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he should have been removed immediately during the investigation and let him linger for over 2 years. If elected officials violate the Bill of Rights, violate the Constitution, we've got to get rid of them. And if they violate the oath to protect and defend, got to get rid of them. There's got to be a stopping loyalty to party and focusing on equality before the law. It's a mandate. The minute that you saw all of those congressmen march to the steps of the Capitol and say, "We are not getting rid of Bill Clinton," was the minute that it was loyalty to party instead of equality under the law. That's wrong. That is a state that is third world, Africa-like, right? Coconut gallery kind of politics. That's not right.